Hello and welcome to another episode. I'm Fiona Umpa with Alfie Data Analytics. So in this video, we look at how to change your data source settings in PowerBI Desktop. So let's get started. So data source settings is where you can visualize and change the data source connection of your PowerBI report. So when you connect and import data into PowerBI Desktop the very first time to create your report, Desktop saves this connection. It then uses this information to reconnect your data source when you refresh data to update your report. There are a couple of methods to change your data source settings in PowerBI Desktop. The first method is under Report View. You can click on Transform Data, the down arrow, and you have access to data source settings. So click that. You'll be presented with the data source settings window. So as you can see, my data source is a CSV file that's saved to the desktop in a folder called data source. So if, for example, I want to change the data source to another folder, I'll just click Change Source and I'll browse to the new location. Select the new location and click Open. Okay, I leave all the settings by default and I'll click OK and close out from there and apply the changes. So that's the first method to changing your data source. You also have the second method is under Model View. You have the same option here under the Query section, Transform Data. Click on the down arrow and you also have the data source settings. The third method is to change using Power Query. So let's go back to the report view and click directly on Transform Data. Okay, you'll then be taken to the Power Query editor. So in the Power Query editor, under the Home tab, you also have the data source settings option here. So click that. And once again, we're presented with the data source settings window. And then, like what we did earlier, just click on Change Source. And based on your data source, the appropriate dialog box will show up, and then you can change the settings here. Okay, so that was the third method. Now the fourth method is to use the advanced editor. So the advanced editor, this window here shows the M code, which lists down all the steps that you've applied, all the transformation steps that you've applied to your data. Okay, so if you want to be adventurous and test this out, you can change the file path directly here. I mean, this is once again, this is a CSV file, so we are given the file path, so you can change it directly here, and then you click Done. Okay, so that was the fourth option. But the fifth option, and the one that I highly recommend, is to create what we call data source parameters. So that's what we'll do now. So under the Home tab, so data source parameters are created in the Power Query editor. So under the Home tab, you click on Manage Parameters. You'll then have the Manage Parameters window up here. From there, you click on New. And here you can type in your parameter details. So for our case, we have a file as our data source. So for files, I like to separate the file path into two parameters, the file directory and the file name. So let's do that. I'll just give it a name, file directory. You can add in a description. You'll have to specify the type. So the file directory is a text value. Under suggested value, you've got three options, whether to set any value, a list of value, or query. So let's keep things simple and just use any value for now. So I'll set that to my current directory location. And I click OK. Okay, so that creates the first parameter, which is the file directory. I'll go back into Manage Parameters and create a second parameter for the file name. So once again, click on New, type in a descriptive name. I'll say file name, add in your description. The type is going to be text, and the value is going to be the name of my file. So paste that in and click OK. So that was the first step, is to create the parameters. So the next step is to set the data source to the parameters. So to change the data source settings to the parameters, you click on your data source query and then under your data source settings, okay, you change the data source here, so click change source. So under the dialog box for your data source, under file path, you click, for this case it's a file, so under file path you click parameter. Okay, notice that you've selected, it's basic by default. So when it's basic by default, we have the option to just set one parameter. But for our case, we've got two parameters to set, so we'll select advanced. And then we'll select again parameter. We'll select file directory, the second parameter, and we'll set that to the file name. Okay, so this is how it's going to look in the M code. Leave all the settings by default and click OK. And close out from there to save. Okay, to test that everything's okay, let's click on refresh preview. So under the home tab, click refresh preview or refresh all. Okay, and we see that there's an error. Okay, when there's an error, you must always look at the error message. So up here it says could not find the file, and as you can see the file path. So as you can see, I forgot to put a / here. So let me go back to the parameters dialog box. So back to manage parameters, I'll put the / under the file directory. So file path, let me just add a /. Click OK, and let's refresh the data again. That looks good. Select your data source query and refresh the data, and everything's connected well. Okay, so let's close and apply all the changes that we've done. Okay, everything looks good. So now back to your report view. Under the transform data, click on the down arrow, and you'll have the option edit parameter. So let's click that. Okay, so now you see you've got access to your parameter, your data source settings directly here. So now if ever you need to change your data source settings, you can do that directly in the edit parameters window. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you got some value in this video. If so, please consider supporting the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.